In the rolling farmlands, where the wind carried the smell of tilled soil and livestock, there lived a young woman named Clara, known across the village not for her beauty nor her charm, but for the clumsy way her feet stumbled across the muddy paths of her family's small hog pen, where she worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk. The children of the town laughed at her torn skirts, her smudged face, the way her boots sank deep into the filth while she carried heavy buckets to feed the pigs, and the women shook their heads when she walked through the market, with hay in her hair, whispering cruelly that she was destined for nothing more than mud and loneliness. And though Clara tried to pretend their words did not pierce her heart, she felt each insult like a stone tied to her chest, dragging her down in shame, for in truth she dreamed of more, dreamed of a life where her hands were not cracked from labor, where her spirit was not crushed beneath laughter, where she was seen for the kindness that lived in her soul. Yet no one cared to look past the dirt under her nails. One evening, as the sky broke open with rain and thunder rolled across the plains, Clara slipped in the mud and fell flat on her face while villagers passing by pointed and mocked, calling her names that stung more fiercely than the cold rain. And she wanted to vanish into the earth itself, but as she rose, her eyes caught sight of a figure standing at the edge of the road, tall and broad-shouldered, his long black hair plastered against his face from the downpour, his sharp gaze fixed not on her clumsiness, but on her with a depth that silenced her trembling heart, for he was not one of the villagers. He was an Apache man, a stranger to their settlement, his leather belt bearing the marks of battles, his shirt torn at the sleeve, where old scars ran across his skin. Yet in his eyes was no mockery, only the weight of recognition, as though he saw something no one else had ever cared to notice. Clara froze, mud dripping from her hair, expecting him to smirk or turn away like all the rest. But instead, he stepped closer, his boots sinking into the mire without hesitation. And when he reached her, he lifted her gently by the arm, steadying her as though she were precious glass rather than a stumbling farm girl. And in that touch, she felt for the first time the warmth of someone who did not see shame in her, but quiet strength, the kind born of hardship. And the villagers who had gathered to jeer fell silent, unsettled by the way this stranger's presence carried dignity and unspoken power. Word spread quickly that an Apache warrior had come to the valley, and with whispers came suspicion, for in those days the settlers held deep prejudice. Yet Clara felt none of the fear they did, only a strange courage swelling inside her. For the man returned the next day and the next, often standing near the hog pen where she worked, saying little, but watching with an intensity that told her he respected her labor in ways no one else could. And when at last he spoke, his voice was low and steady, telling her that he had seen her stumble but also rise, had seen her mocked yet endure, and that in his people's eyes, endurance was a greater beauty than any fine dress or polished words. And Clara, who had never been called beautiful for anything other than ridicule, felt tears prick her eyes. Still, their bond drew anger from the villagers, who believed she was foolish for welcoming the gaze of a man they considered beneath them and their cruelty grew. Yet the more they mocked, the more she discovered her own strength reflected in his presence, for he taught her to stand tall, even when her hands were dirty, to see pride in her scars rather than shame, and to understand that worth was not measured in silk, gowns, or polished shoes, but in the spirit to rise again after falling. And so, the girl of the hog pen began to transform, not into a lady of refinement, but into a woman of resilience, her laughter bolder, her step steadier, her heart unafraid of mud or insult. For she had learned that when someone finally sees your worth, the world's cruelest voices can no longer unmake you. And as she stood beside the Apache man beneath the storm-lit sky, with rain washing the dirt from her skin, Clara understood that her story was no longer one of clumsiness, but of courage, and that those who mocked her would one day speak of her name with awe rather than derision, because the man who had come from the mountains had seen what they never could, a heart as vast as the horizon. And friends, if Clara's journey stirred something inside you, if you believe in the power of unseen worth, of rising even when mocked, of finding strength in unexpected places, then do not let this story end here, for there are many more tales of courage and love waiting to be told. And by subscribing to this channel, you become part of a family that believes in sharing them, in lifting voices long ignored, in shining light where the world has cast shadows. So click that subscribe button now and let us walk together through stories that will inspire, heal, and remind you of the power within your own heart.